Hello, family. Welcome to JFK Today, your direct link to all things politics, comedy, and culture. I'm your host, Janaya Future Khan, champ yapper and frequent nuisance in the activist and comedy worlds. Let's get dialed in. So, quick overview. I'm going to hit you with some quick hits. Trump versus Harris on the economy and two truths, no lie. All right, your quick hits. RFK Jr. endorses Donald Trump. What a loser. It's so weird. What a step out from the Kennedy legacy, but whatever, there you go. Trump says that he prefers an unmuted mic in the debate that he's featured to have with Kamala Harris on the 10th of September, to which I say, no, you raggedy bitch, mute the mics. It's the best way to go. It's the stark contrast in coherence versus incoherence, not missable. Okay. This is something else. Ann Coulter. So I wasn't aware of this at the time, but apparently, post Tim Walz's speech, and then post Kamala's speech, where everybody gets on the stage and everybody was so excited on that last day of the DNC, you might have noticed that Gus Walz, Tim Walz's son, was so ecstatic. It was this moment of genuine human emotion. It was really beautiful. He was so clearly proud of his father, Gus Walz. He's 21 years old. It was one of those moments where you actually do remember that our politicians are human beings, even though they can be very annoying. So Ann Coulter, right, gets online, and then she starts making fun of Gus Walz, calling him weird, suggesting that maybe there was something wrong with him. I want to be really clear, right, what it was suggestive of. It is public knowledge, both through the Walz family and just in general, that Gus Walz has a learning disability. So Ann Coulter is out here bullying a 21-year-old for being proud of his father. You dusty, crusty, musty, fucking, when I think of Ann Coulter, you might not know who she is. Ann Coulter was a parasite on the whale that swallowed Jonah. Ann Coulter is like the scrotum-skinned monster from Pan's Labyrinth. Ann Coulter is the vampire that turned the vampire Lestat, okay? This is who Ann Coulter is. She is perhaps the absolute worst human being on the planet. She's the rat that brought the bubonic plague to Europe. That's who Ann Coulter is. We don't actually need to worry about Ann Coulter. You dried out 283-year-old looking bitch. Don't ever fix your mouth again on Gus Walz's name. You're so irrelevant. You are so irrelevant that you're best conjured like that of a wraith or a demon for a roast stage. Anyway, so on to the economy, right? Trump versus Harris. I'll just say this. Ann Coulter is the vulture that ripped out the liver of Prometheus every night as Zeus's punishment. That's who Ann Coulter is. So anyway, Trump versus Harris on the economy. I got to tell you, so we've been talking about the need to check out what Kamala Harris's policy was, and specifically economy. And when I hear economy, there's something that happens in my brain where I kind of just zone out. But we need to zoom in on this one because the economy is the number one issue to voters. And specifically, it is the high cost of living. People want a government. They want our federal government to play a direct role in lowering the costs of living. And if you're like me, you have noticed things have changed post-pandemic and really just in general. As a millennial, I can tell you that there are several articles that refer to millennials as the unluckiest generation. The economy bottomed out with millennials and has not recovered since. So we're all on this really terrible economic roller coaster ride. So we have Trump and his economic policy, which can be wrapped up pretty quickly, and then we have Kamala Harris's. So I want us to understand what these candidates are in terms of the economy, because we don't get to just ignore what matters most to people and really what matters most to us. The economy is what is shaping and forming so much of our experience of the world. So, and the challenging thing with economy isn't just that it's so boring when you hear it, it's that it's very hard to see the impacts of real economic policies and the changes until several years after they've been implemented. But luckily, you're starting to see some of the effects of Biden's, campaign promises and policies roll in. It didn't go as far as it needed to go. So let me just tell you right now, they're going head to head, toe to toe. It's neck and neck as much as we've seen this weird tsunami of Kamala Harris energy coming in. My concern is, and it should be all of our concern, is the more that she commits to a policy platform, the weirder it gets. So that's where we're at. So what is Trump's policy platform? Trump believes that he can use the power of government to force companies to create jobs and production. That's literally like him being like, do this thing because I told you to. That is his plan entirely. This is from the Washington Post. This is from the New York Times. This is from the Daily. I had to listen and I had to read and I had to research because I'm like, this literally can't be true. That is his goal. So he imagines, and you can hear it in many, many campaign speeches, that he can just force private companies to lower their costs because he said so. I mean, I do admire that level of delusion. I'm like kind of behind it. I'm like, go ahead. Like if that's what you can actually do, but we know that he can't. One of his main areas of focus is he wants to levy new taxes on imported goods. You might recall how many times he mentions China, right? And when it comes to China and the tariffs, that's his goal with that. He wants to keep implementing those tariffs and keep raising the taxes on imported goods, right? So that's kind of it for Donald Trump. Like he's got he says words like he wants to lower car payments. He wants to slice your energy bills in half, but he has no feasible policy to do that. And then not only is he saying he's going to do it, he's saying he's going to do it within the first year of his presidency. It's just not realistic. And I'm a guy that's like, make it happen. But there is no plan in place for that because he actually has no interest in seeing that through. This is my personal favorite. He said this, and then they use this quote on the Daily, which I listened to this morning because I was like, let me make sure this is full and well-rounded and I'm not missing anything as I talk to you about this. So this is what he says. Donald Trump believes that the solution to skyrocketing rent, right, is deporting immigrants. That's literally his entire plan. He's like, oh, your rent's too high? I'm going to lower the rent by just deporting immigrants, and that's it. And when they said this on the Daily, this is how they referred to it as. They said, this is costly to the economy and social fabric. And then I waited for them to say more, and then they didn't. I was like, how about it's evil? How about you sound like Darth Vader? How about this feels very Hitler-y? Yeah, this is it. That is Trump's entire economic platform. It's really going to, if you look at his last 4 years in office between 2016 and 2020, honestly, it was the people who benefited most from Donald Trump and his tax policies were corporations. They were number one, and number two was the very, very rich, which is why you're seeing so many of these male streamers come out, these 20-something-year-olds who are multi-millionaires, because that's what they see. And that's what happens when you get red-pilled in the manosphere. But that's an episode for another day. So what is Kamala Harris saying now that she has everybody's attention? So she's finally rolling out her economic plan. This is what she says her goals are. Her goals are to break down monopolies. And in breaking down these monopolies, right, she's going to create more competition. That's going to allow people to pay less for things, right? And give some of these smaller companies a boost or a subsidy or a tax break to make them competitive. Where she's really focusing is on her efforts to bring down costs of food and childcare, right? And here is the thing. As I mentioned, post-pandemic, it's not the same. It's really not the same. The cost of rent, but really the cost of food has gone up exponentially, and we have not been able to get that back on track. I've been furious about it because here's the thing. When we say monopolies, that simply means that too few firms, so there's maybe a handful of companies, and they have too much power. And when you have that much power, you can literally buy out your competition. You can cut them off at the knees, and it immediately makes for no competition. And when they have monopolies like that, it means that whatever they say we should pay, we have to pay if we want to access those goods. The goods in this case is literally just bread on the table. And this is one of these massive monopolies are one of the effects of late stage capitalism. You've heard terms like late stage capitalism. It means this is what happened when we were all gas, no brakes on the industrial era all the way up to right now, right? Where corporations and these massive companies and multi-millionaires can just keep merging and merging and merging until there's only a small handful. You can see it from the weird ways that we now have to pay for like 1 trillion subscriptions to the cost of food in grocery stores. And really, even those have shifted. So as boring as it might seem, Kamala having an answer for this actually matters. And it's something that we should be looking at all politicians across the board. Like, I don't know, what are y'all doing if you're not fighting these massive corporate monopolies? And you've heard me talk about antitrust, but let me just like break it down in a way that makes sense, right? Grocery stores are seeing their highest profits margins in 20 years. They are making buco dollars, they're making bank. So big companies are actually ripping us off. There are things they're doing it in multiple ways. If you are bored for a minute and you want to try something out, it's people were doing it on TikTok. If you go back to an order that you made when we had to order things online. So if you go maybe to your Amazon, you go through your grocery or whatever, maybe you ordered from, Bristol, maybe you ordered from Fresh, whatever it was, and refill your cart with exactly what the items were back then and look at that price difference. It is staggering. It's staggering. And there are other ways that they are ripping us off, and things like shrinkflation, which is another cute word that we've seen online, but it essentially means they're charging us the same amount of money while making the product smaller and offering less in it. So we're paying the same amount of money for a portion that is maybe 25 to 30% less, right? So prices have not gone down since the pandemic, and we should be furious about that because we are the people, like just the everyday people, the proletariat, the working class, the middle class, whatever it is, are paying the costs so that corporations can be subsidized, so that a couple of fat cats can jump out of like their golden parachutes and just sail off into the sunset, despite the fact that they've done irrevocable harm to our literal economy and to us. Like, it's weird because it's like the Gilded Age during the Great Depression. Like, there's really two major lifestyles that are just happening here. One is the one that you can't really see, right? Unless you know like the Gettys and the Bezoses or whatever. And the other is what we see every day. So Kamala Harris wants to take on big tech. She wants to take on monopoly, and she wants to use the federal government to do it. So Trump was like, I'm going to use the federal government to just make private companies do what I say and make new jobs, and that's it. Kamala Harris actually is like, no, I want to use the federal government to break antitrust laws, to break up these massive corporate mergers and to stop them in the future, and to stop price gouging. So that is what happens when a corporation takes advantage of a literal pandemic or crisis and makes us pay more money for no reason, because it knows that we absolutely need that service. You know who covers that well? I mentioned this before, but it actually is a really useful book. Naomi Klein's Disaster Capitalism. We are going to see more and more of that. But having these antitrust laws in place, and we've just recently seen how effective they can be with Google, albeit it came way too late, is we need it. You need strong antitrust policy because it prevents large corporations from literally wielding market power that hurts us first and competitors second, especially when trillions of public dollars are flowing into them. Like, they're literally getting away like bandits. Like, I feel like I just got robbed, and I'm furious. Like, I'm upset about it. So, do we like her now? Is the question. She also had stuff to say about housing, right? Now, I told you that Donald Trump was like, throw out the immigrants. That's literally the answer. They are the red herring. They're the scapegoat. It's throw out the immigrants, throw out the immigrants. Kamala Harris has said that she's going to build 3 million new housing units, right? The thing is, we actually have, like, yes, we have a housing crisis. We have a housing crisis. Some of that is manufactured. A lot has to do with how much housing costs in the first place. A lot of it has to do with the cost of rent. We have, it depends on what state you're in, but we have so many vacant buildings and properties that could very easily be built up to have temporary and permanent housing for low income and disenfranchised people. But we've talked about that. There is a lot of resistance towards. So, what is her plan around this 3 million? Making 3 million new housing units. So she wants to use these federal dollars to do that. She's not talking about throwing out immigrants, although we do know that the Democratic Party is very much borrowing the speaking points of immigrants, re the right. And, I thought about it post DNC, and then I replayed a lot of those speeches online, and I was like, oh, it wasn't just Palestinians that were robbed of a moment, it was also immigrants. This was a moment for the Democratic Party to present a kind of moral correctness, which they just simply failed to do. I think we really need to pay attention to that as the left, because the ways in which community and people, society can be turned against each other very quickly when they're in economic crisis. It happens very, very quickly. I mean, I could tell you all about how white people threw black folks under the bus because y'all niggas got offered some corn back in the day during the founding of America. I'm still embarrassed for you for that. Like, we had the coolest revolution. You had Bacon's Rebellion, all these amazing tiny revolutions. We're fighting against New America because black enslaved people and indentured white laborers were coming together to fight against the merchant class and the rich. The losers who couldn't hack it in England came over here and were like, we need to do these things. We're trying to build this new country out. We got to take the land from the Indians, and we want to enslave these people. We want indentured laborers forever. And then what happened? Well, we all got together and we were like, oh my God, eat the rich. Forget this class of people. We don't need to do what they say. We can literally just be out here on our own. And then the rich people got together and were like, ooh, this is getting too impactful. This is getting too effective. What do we do? What should we do? What do we do? So what did they do? They offered the poor whites some corn and a musket. And I was like, nah, like, no way. Like, we were homies. We were doing some awesome shit. Like, no way. And then I turned the page in the people's history, and there it was. You sold us out for some corn. Corn doesn't even slap like that outside the hands of Mexican and Latino people. What are you doing? Corn, a starch, my nigga? You threw us under the bus for some starch? And then the land that they gave these poor white folks, so they did offer them some land, was land that was actually indigenous territory. I mean, it all is, to be clear. But this was still very much inhabited by indigenous people. They literally used poor white people to fight indigenous people to expand their own agenda. Like, it's the same playbook over and over and over again. And low key, I don't know if I'm ever going to get over I'm pretty sure that's where the term corny came from. Like, corny came from when poor white people threw black people under the bus for a fucking musket and some corn. A musket is not even a cool gun. You had to jerk that thing off about 30 times to get a shot off, and you were just as likely to blow your hand or your face off. I'm so embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed. Point is, the ruling class knows exactly how to set up a scapegoat so that we keep fighting each other and we never look up at power. And I want to be very clear about the ruling class. I'm not talking about, and I've said this before, I'm not interested in talking about movie stars or whatever, right? Unless they're Ryan Reynolds. But I'm just not interested. Like, there are a literal class of people who are deciding the shape and the contour and the nuances of our lives. And we barely know who they are outside of the big players. And you best believe I'm power mapping them. And that is going to be an episode at some point. But I am so upset. And I'm not about to let us treat immigrants as if they are the cause for our economic strife in this society. Anyway, back to Kamala Harris. She wants to, this whole tax plan with the housing expenditures and then also the child tax credit plan, so that's going to help middle and lower income parents. Altogether, this will cost about $5 trillion, right? And you're like, whoa, is that going to come out of my taxes? Because honestly, the IRS is so mean to me. I just got here. I literally just got to America, and they take so much of my monies, and I didn't even do anything. Like, I didn't even do anything. I'm just out here trying to do the Lord's work, and Audre Lorde. I'm trying to do the Lord's work, and they just keep taking my money and aren't even nice to me. So, is it the average person who's going to be paying for Kamala Harris's plan? No. I looked into it. No. In her plan, it is going to be paid for by taxing corporations and the very, very rich the way that we ought to, when you look at other societies like, I don't know, Denmark, etc., where the quality of life and the standard of living is exponentially higher and people are just generally happier. So this is for us. What do we do with this information, right? If you think about yesterday's episode, we talked about the need to take the information that we're given, take what we understand about this moment, and drive focus to where it needs to be. What does riding the wave look like in this moment? This is what I'm going to tell you. Connect the issue that matters most to most people with the issues that matter most to you, right? Rather than shame, judge, or sow fear and dissent when it comes to bringing momentum and the need to keep fighting for the lives of Palestinians all across the Middle East, rather than using shame and guilt and fear and disgust, right? Connect it to this economic issue that people are already so invested in, right? This is the number one issue to voters. This matters. It's not just voters, the number one issue to people at large. So when we talk about the fact that $20 billion just got sent so that Israel could shoot some bombs over at Hezbollah and blow up some kids and schools and hospitals and make sure that there's polio in the water in Palestine, that's $20 billion. Where could that have gone? Where could that have gone here? How quickly does that add up to $5 trillion on its own? I mean, we can literally just generate money, America. It's wild. They're just like, oh no, somebody's in trouble? Oh no, did a dam break? Let's send $8 trillion to Israel. Oh my God, did Kamala Harris get a paper cut? Somebody send $19 trillion to Israel. Oh my God. Do we have infrastructural issues in America? What did you say about our public education system crumbling at our fingertips? Send $20 trillion to Israel every time something goes wrong here. Why don't we just send money to Israel to fix everything? That literally could have been the entire Marvel's films every time America's in crisis. Just send 20 billion, trillion, $100 million to Israel and all will be just fine. That's literally what it feels like. It's wild. It's wild. But connect. If this is the thing, and I promise you, I know this is not the most satisfying answer, but this is how organizing works. You don't get people to come to your movement. We've seen the limitations of that. I mean, Chicago, there were people who were fighting, but my God, was it at critical mass? No. And that's okay, because it's about critical connections right now. It's about critical connections right now. So you don't wait. It's not one of those, if they build it, they will come, despite how hot he is, right? Like, this is about you go to where people are. They don't come to you as people who care about things. And I say organizer, but you don't have to be an organizer. You're somebody that matters, and this is about something that you care about. So the question is, right, are we able to hold the contradictions, right, of this moment? That the American government hurts people, and that we want to leverage the American government to stop hurting people. That is truly what we have to do in this moment. It's what every organizer has done. It's what every artist has done that tells the truth and resists the status quo. It's what every caring, thinking person does. I mentioned that we live in perpetual contradiction, but can we, in this moment, hold two truths at once? Can we? In his 1936 essay, because you know I love me a literary reference and I also love me an author. F. Scott Fitzgerald, because I'm like, is The Great Gatsby it? Like, I had to read that in high school. It kind of slapped, kind of didn't. I did like his thing about new money, because I'm like, I love, like, I could really visualize the story, and I was like, oh my God, rich whites, old money versus mid-whites, new money. This was a kind of 1% insight I don't generally get access to. So I was in. He had me hook, line, and sinker. So anyway, he wrote this: the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function, right? That means that we have multiple modes of being, and we have the freedom to switch between them that allows us to move people and to move forward despite the obstacles in our way, despite the conflicting priorities and the other challenges that come with it. This This is what it feels like to hold at the same time possibility and despair, to hold hope and hopelessness. This is the task of the thinking, feeling individual in our time. This is what it means to be alive. I want to give you a concrete example of when I was challenged in a really significant way. So if you know me, you know I'm one of these losers that cares about the planet and cares about people and, comes from a lot of poverty, etc. That's not why I was a loser. I'm a loser because I care about stuff, and caring is loser behavior. We know this. So, like many of you might have, I read at a very pivotal moment in my life, Alex Haley and Malcolm X's The Autobiography of Malcolm X. It was like a lesson plan for me. It was a blueprint. I felt so much overlap. I too had a lot of run-ins with law enforcement, a little bit of incarceration. It's like I was, that sort of bad kid with a fast brain and a faster mouth. And, just like Malcolm, I found myself through fealty to a movement and to an institution and to a person, loyalty to a leader that ended up not necessarily being all the things we wanted that person to be, with some betrayal. So Malcolm X's blueprint felt like my blueprint, and it wasn't about achieving what he achieved. He's Malcolm X. He's great. But man, shoot for the stars. Am I right? Even the relationship to his mother felt like that, similar to mine, where she was institutionalized, and they didn't get into it in the book, but there were references, and I dug up all the research that I could on Malcolm X, and I learned all about him, and I listened to every speech, and I read every article and every essay and every lesson. Anyway, point is, I knew just about everything there was to find out about Malcolm X. So then, like, Les Payne comes out with this book that I was like, I've got to read it. It took 30 years of research to do. It interviewed everybody that even remotely knew Malcolm X. It was awesome. It was highly anticipated, and it was one of the most thorough, meticulously constructed looks into a man's life. It was Les Payne's life's work. It took 30 years, so he actually passed away in the process of writing it, but his daughter, Tamara Payne, took it on, and so she finished it. And so I read this book feeling confident that I knew what there was to know about Malcolm X, at least on more so than maybe the average person. I learned a lot in that book, but I'll jump to the point in the interest of time and say this, right? Here's a person I looked up to my whole life. I became, I saw the utility and the function of public speaking because of Malcolm X. And I've studied all the greats because of Malcolm X. It's not mentioned in the autobiography as a lot of his life. Like, for example, you don't know in the autobiography that his parents were actually organizers, right? They were part of Marcus Garvey's, UNIA movement. That's a whole other thing. I thought that was a weird omission. But what was most interesting to me was learning that around the ages of 14 or 15, right? So what is true, we know, is like, Malcolm, and, he was always gregarious, always smart, all this other stuff. But just like in the book, Malcolm's father was murdered, but he was murdered because of his activist work, which was not, it was treated as a mystery in the book, but it wasn't a mystery. He was murdered because he was an activist. And that left Malcolm's mother to deal with 7 kids, right? The eldest brother was Wilfred. So they were not doing very well economically. And by the time Malcolm was 14, 15 years old, his family was really not doing well. So Wilfred, being the eldest, went out and started to work. His mother's a proud woman, rose him up, did these things. I still get a little choked up and hesitant to say this, even though it's literally in a book read by, I'm sure, millions of people. So Wilfred would send home money, and the money was to help with paying the bills and really getting food on the table. Well, Malcolm knew when the money was coming, and it was sent by mail. So what he would do is he would wait until the envelope came in, and then he would take the money and go spend it on girls and go spend it on films and go spend it on weed. And while that was happening, his mother in particular, because mothers will sacrifice everything, slowly began to kind of starve to death. She had such an insane nutritional deficit that, well, to be honest, she was institutionalized in Kalamazoo not because of some mental health issue, but because she had been so starved of nutrition that she started to lose some of her mental faculties. So while his mother was literally deteriorating, Malcolm was taking the money that was sent to help his family out and spending it on himself. That's a really hard thing. That's a really hard thing. I had to ask myself, am I disillusioned? Did I believe he was perfect? And, he never pretended to be, but that was a story that mattered. I don't know I don't believe in the concepts of good people or bad people. I believe in what we do. And I think that's a choice that we make every day. And I think it's something that can change. They could start out as one thing in the beginning of the day and turn into another. I hate morality. I'm very much more interested in ethics and principles. But that's one of those moments where you can hold, where I had to hold, where you can hold, where we can all hold two truths at once. And really they inform each other, right? To me, it makes Malcolm's transformation that more meaningful. But I'm much more aware of the sacrifices made by his mother, by his parents, than I ever were. And it makes me appreciate the story all the more. My point is, right, there's a Somali proverb, right? Trouble has horns to hold, but not tails, which means I'd rather grapple with the truth than try to catch after it because you can't. Once it's gone, it's gone. You can choose to be in the fight, or you can choose to sit on the sidelines. I choose to be in the fight. I want you to choose that with me, whatever that looks like for you. And the last thing I'll say about this is, we really stopped doing service work in the interest of looking at these big systems and trying to go after these big structural changes. Don't forget that volunteering is awesome, right? When I was at my most lost, I started just going to a food bank and just volunteering hours there. And, that was something that kept my family fed different points in times. And, don't ever undercut that service work and that volunteerism that sort of was the hallmark of our leftist principles and our leftist movements. And I know that kind of got lost with the structural stuff, but we're going to be fine. I'm so ready for this. I have so much belief in us. I have so much belief in you. And the more that I sit with it, the more I understand about this, the clearer I get that we're just in the beginning of this fight. And we really are. We really are. And so are you. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how young you are. As long as you're here, everything is possible. And I believe in that possibility, and I'm fighting for that possibility right alongside you. So with that, with our two truths, no lies, why don't we hit the VMs for that question of the day?
Hey, Janaya. My name's Dee. I am from Hamilton, Ontario. And my question for you is really about your name. You go by Janaya sometimes, and then in the olden days of when you were first doing Instagram Lives, I remember you were going by Future. Is there a preference between your names? Do you go by both? Yeah, just wondering. Thanks so much. Bye.
Super dope question. Also, shout out Hamilton. Honestly, a low-key fun city that gets shit on all the time. It's just like, it's Toronto's weird little cousin. What a great question. So here's, professionally, I go by Janaya because I love watching people stutter over my very full-ass ethnic name. It's so funny. So it's like, you can call me Future once I know you know how to say Janaya. But Future is a movement name, so the movement really named me that. They gave me that name, and then it became so prolific that it had to be in part of my citizenship process because it was a name that I was very much known by. And so I don't know that I have a preference. I kind of like them both. They do speak to different eras, which is why I kind of adopted Future as like an actual, like, right there in the middle. But I definitely am like, can you say Janaya? Like, can you? Also, I'm way cuter than Future the rapper. Let's just be real about that. Like, I'm pocket-sized. You can take me everywhere. I'm like your little activist to go. So, what a dope question. Thank you for that. And with that, I want to say to you, thank you so much for listening to JFK Today. It means the world to me, right? This show really is a labor of love. We got new episodes dropping 4 times a week. We're available everywhere podcasts are streaming. Yo, I want to hear from you. Drop me your voice note questions at jfktodayshow@gmail.com. All the questions are the good questions, trust me. Shout out to KR and the JFK team, and shout out to you, the listeners who make this all possible.